Hello everybody. In previous videos we've taken a look at how to set animation keys on objects as well as how to adjust their timing. As a quick review, I have this cone here that is not animated yet. If I want to set an animation key on it, remember you select the object. Under your animation tools here you can go to Key, Set Key, or you can use the hotkey of S. I'll set a key at the beginning. Remember, you must have two animation keys because we need the values to change from one position to another position, so you have to have two keys. I'm going to scrub in my timeline to the end here, and I will move the cone over 24 units, and I will set another key by pressing S this time. Now I have animation. I can scrub through my animation as well as play the animation. Now, timing has to do with the amount of time, in this case with this cone, that it takes from it to go from, in this case, frame 0 to frame 48. 48 frames is 2 seconds of animation. So it is taking this cone 2 seconds to get to its destination. If I wanted to adjust the timing, we've looked at a couple different ways to do that. One way is in the timeline itself. I can hold down Shift and click on my keyframe here, and I can move that keyframe anywhere on the timeline I wish. I'm going to put it at frame 12. So this will take about half a second now. I've sped up the animation so that it reaches its destination considerably more quickly. When something happens over fewer frames, it happens more quickly. Another way that we can adjust the timing of our animation is by using what is called the dope sheet, which we also looked at in an earlier video. To access the dope sheet, I will go to Windows, Animation Editors, Dope Sheet, and here I'll see my keyframes. Here's my first keyframe on frame 0 and my second keyframe on frame 12. If I wish to adjust the timing of this animation, and instead of it only taking half a second, I want it to take a full second, I'll select my last keyframe here, middle mouse drag it to frame 24. Now, if I play my animation, the cone takes a full second to reach its destination. Now let's take a look at a couple other examples. Here I have 4 more cones, a total of 5 cones here. I'll select them all because what I'd like you to notice is that they all have identical timing. In other words, they all start from, let's say, the same starting line, and they all end at the same finish line at exactly the same time. In fact, if we look at these objects in our dope sheet, you'll notice that they all have a key on frame 0 and a key on frame 24. However, if we play the animation, you'll notice that they are animated differently. While they all have identical timing, the spacing is different. The way that they move in between the two keyframes is different. And that's what we'll be taking a look at today. So let's see how these 5 cones differ. We know that their timing is identical. They start being animated at the same frame. They end on the same frame. But if I scrub the animation, you'll notice that they leave this starting line at different speeds, and they arrive at the finish line at different speeds as well. If we take a look at the red cone, for example, and I scrub through the animation, you'll notice that it comes out slowly. It starts to go faster, 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 and then it slows down again before arriving to its destination. The yellow cone, on the other hand, seems to go at a very constant rate throughout its whole animation. The green cone, on the other hand, seems to do absolutely nothing until that final frame, frame 24. Our cyan cone comes out of the starting line very, very quickly, but slows down as it approaches the finish line. And finally, our blue cone here comes out of the starting line very, very slowly, but then gets faster, faster, faster until it arrives at the finish line. How can we visualize these differences? Well, if we look at the dope sheet, the dope sheet doesn't give us any valuable information here other than the where the keys are in time. So here we know that we have our keys on frame 0, and then we have the final key where they reach their destination on frame 24. But that's really the only information it's giving us right now. And to get a better idea of what is actually happening in between these keyframes, we will open up what is called the graph editor. And the graph editor can be found under Windows, Animation Editors, Graph Editor. Now, in my graph editor, I have my 4 cones selected here, and these, what I'm selecting now, are the animation curves for my different cones. So we can see that on their translate X value, they all start at 0. They start at a value of 0, and also at time at 0. But if I scrub to the end, you'll notice that they all end up with a value, a translate X value of 24, and also in time, they're at frame 24. So the key thing to read the graph editor is that this axis, the vertical axis, represents value, and this horizontal axis here indicates time. I'm going to take my graph editor and move it up here a little out of the way so that we can actually see what's happening here. And I'm going to select just the original cone, the red cone, and we'll see what we can learn by looking at its animation curve here in the graph editor. So what I can see here by reading this graph editor is that it comes out slowly. It gets faster and faster as this animation curve becomes steeper, and then as it flattens out again, it slows down. This is what's called slow out, because it comes out of this keyframe more slowly and then speeds up. And this is what we would call slow in, because it comes into this keyframe slowing down. Slow out and slow in. You may also hear this terminology of slow out and slow in referred to as ease out and ease in. Now I'm going to maximize my graph editor so that you can learn how to navigate within the graph editor here. Very similar to navigating in your viewports as well as in the dope sheet. Remember that you can use the Alt key and your your mouse buttons. So if I use Alt and the middle mouse button, I can pan. I cannot rotate. If I do Alt and the left mouse button, we are unable to rotate, obviously, in the graph editor. But if I use the Alt and the right mouse button, I can zoom in and out. In addition, you can of course use your wheel, the middle mouse button wheel, to zoom in and out in the graph editor. And then one other thing I should note is that not only can we zoom in and out on the animation curve here like this, but if you hold down Alt and the Shift key on your keyboard and then use the right mouse button, you can zoom in on time independently, or zoom in on scale as well. It's not actually changing the values of the animation curve themselves. It's just a means for zooming in on time or value. One other thing to keep in mind is that you can also select your animation curve and press F on your keyboard and it will focus on that animation curve. Or if I select a keyframe and I press F, it'll focus in on that as well. Because I don't have multiple keyframes here, just a beginning and an end, nothing is happening here. But if I had other keyframes in here, it would focus on that keyframe. So again, just to reiterate, remember that this axis here indicates time and this axis here indicates value. So if we look at this animation curve, it starts at frame 0, ends at frame 24, and over the span of that time, it changes in value over time. And we have what is called slow out and slow in happening here. Let's compare this to one of the other cones. So I will minimize my graph editor here. And let's compare it to this yellow cone here. So I'll select the yellow cone. And what you'll notice is if we compare these two, once again taking note that they begin and end at the same point, but their actual animation curves look very different. If we look at just the yellow animation curve here, you'll notice that there is no slow out and there is no slow in. It goes at a very constant speed throughout its entire animation. Let's take a look at the green cone now. The green cone is a very interesting case because, again, you'll notice as I scrub, nothing happens to it until we get to that last frame, and then it just pops into place. And if I select the animation curve, this is what it looks like. This indicating that it's maintaining the same value over the frames here until it immediately goes to frame 24. If we look at the cyan cube, you'll notice that it also has a different animation curve here. You notice that it comes out of the starting line very quickly but slows down at the end. And in fact, if we look at its animation curve here, you'll notice that there is no slow out. It comes out very steeply from that animation curve, but then it really flattens out as it arrives to its destination, having some extreme slow in. If we contrast this with the final cone here, you'll notice that its animation curve looks to be the exact opposite. In other words, it has extreme slow out, coming out very, very slowly, but then the animation curve becomes steeper and steeper, indicating that it is becoming faster and faster, that it is moving faster and faster until it finally arrives at its destination. And in fact, if we play the animation, you'll see that that is exactly what happens. It comes out slowly and then arrives very, very quickly. What we'll do next is see how I animated these cones to behave as they do. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to get rid of the animation on all of my cones here. And I can do that a number of different ways. I think I'll do it in the graph editor because that's what we're really looking at today. I'm going to select that last keyframe on all of the cones, and I'll simply hit the delete key. And now you'll see that they are no longer animated. But because I'd like to start cleanly with this, I will also select the first keyframe here, and I'll delete that as well. So the first one that we'll take a look at will be the red cone, and I'm on frame 0. What I will do is set a keyframe on it. I can do that by pressing S. Please do notice that in fact I set a key on all 10 of these channels here. I really only need to set it on this channel, the Translate X channel, but we'll deal with that in a little bit. I'm going to scrub my timeline to frame 24, and I'm going to move my cone exactly 24 units, and I will key it by pressing S. So now my cone is animated, and we can look at all its animation curves here in the graph editor. Notice that, as I was saying, the only channel that I've actually animated is the Translate X. However, I did set keys on all these other channels. If we were to take a look at, let's say, Translate Y, you'll notice it is it has animation keys on it, but the value is not changing over time. And for the sake of making this a little bit easier to work with and to show you, I'm going to get rid of these other channels because we're not going to need them for this demonstration. I could delete them here. I could simply select the curves that I want in the graph editor and delete them. You'll notice that I deleted these here, so they indicate that they're no longer animated because they don't have this red tick mark on them. I could also delete it from the channel box itself simply by selecting them here, right-clicking, and saying Cut Selected. That will also get rid of those animation keys. So the thing I'd like to point out to you here is that this animation curve is the default behavior when you set keys. When you set keys, it's going to put a default slow out and slow in on your animation. And that's what's happening here. Now the next example, I'm going to animate very similarly. I'll set a key on frame 0. This time, because I know I only want to animate on Translate X, I'll go ahead and set the key here in my channel box. I'll select Translate X, right-click on it, and say Key Selected. This is a convenient way of just setting a key on a single channel. I'll scrub to frame 24 and move my cone 24 units, and I will key it again by right-clicking and keying it. Now, Remember, I said that slow in, slow out is the default behavior, so currently, if I play this animation, the animation should be identical. The red and the yellow should go at exactly the same speed. They're animated exactly the same. But what I actually want the yellow cone to do is to move at a very constant speed. I don't want any slow in or slow out on its movement. So what I'm going to do is select the animation curve, and I'm going to press this button here. This will make the animation curve linear. In fact, if I put my mouse over it, I think it'll tell me what it does. Yes. If I put my mouse on that icon, it says linear tangents. And I will apply that. You see how it changed the animation curve so that now, over time, it goes at a very constant speed. In fact, if we were to scrub the animation, we know this one has a slow out. This one is moving linearly. So as I scrub through here, you'll notice that this cone, the yellow cone, goes at equal increments on every frame. Notice on the graph, you'll notice that each frame, it moves at a very constant speed. In fact, in the middle, the red one catches up because it's going faster. And then it'll, in fact, pass the yellow cone, but they still arrive at the same time because the red one will slow in while the yellow one goes at that constant speed. If we look at both the animation curves together, you'll see exactly what is happening here. So the next example will be this green cone. I'll animate it as well. Once again, I'll key its translate X on frame 0. I'll scrub to frame 24, move it exactly 24 units, and key it there as well. We get our default slow in, slow out behavior. I'm going to select the curve, press F to focus on it. Here we can see that it's got that same default behavior with the slow out and the slow in. But this time I'm going to use this button here, which is the stepped keys. And if I put my mouse on it, you'll notice it says stepped tangents. With my animation curve selected, I will click that button, and this will make it so that it keeps a constant value until it arrives to the keyframe. And if I scrub it, you'll notice nothing happens until it arrives to frame 24. Moving on to the cyan cone. Once again, I'll just very quickly set my keyframes on frame 0 and on frame 24. Select the curve, press F to focus on it. We have our default slow in, slow out, but this one I'm going to make come out very, very quickly, so there will be no slow out. But then coming into the finish line here, it'll have extreme slow in. And to do that is very simple in this case. What I can do is select the keyframe and then grab the handle here. You'll see that there's this tangent handle here. I'll grab that handle there and I'll move it using my middle mouse button. Notice how I can change my animation curve. I want to make sure not to adjust it so it goes up like this and beyond this value here. It's going to work better if I make sure that it comes in nice and smooth like this. I'll show you, well, we can take a look at what happens if I were to make this value go beyond that value. What you'll see is that it's going to overshoot the finish line, and then it'll come back. So you'll see it comes out very quickly. It'll go past the finish line and then return. can see what's happening here. I don't really want that, so I'm going to select the handle. I'm using my middle mouse button, just so you know. I'm using the middle mouse button to move the tangent here. I'll use my middle mouse button to move the tangent so that it doesn't overshoot this key, but it comes in nice and slow. And if we play the animation here, you'll notice that it'll come out of the starting line very quickly, but then slow into the finish line. And finally, we'll do the opposite to this last cone. I'll key it on frame 0, go to frame 24, move it to the finish line, key it as well, focus on its animation curve in the graph editor, and let's see, this time we said we wanted an extreme slow out, but then it'll come in very quickly, very abruptly. So once again, I'm going to select the tangent and middle mouse drag it, being careful not to overshoot, in this case, the beginning frame. You'll see if I do that, what will happen actually is that it will go backwards before it goes forward. You'll see it goes back and then comes out very quickly and arrives. I don't actually want that, so I'm going to adjust my animation curve like this so I get this nice slow out, and then it'll come very abruptly to the finish line. And if we play the animation, you'll see that's exactly what we get. So understanding how to work with these animation curves is going to make your animations much more effective, much more pleasing, much more convincing, because it doesn't just matter, the timing is not all that matters, but the spacing as well. And we'll take more of a look at spacing in the next video. But I hope that this video is useful for you. I recommend you try out these techniques, learn them, play around with them, get familiar with them. I'll see you next time.